Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Payoff Pitch. I'm your host Paul Valley. Orioles sitting at 54-40, half game back of the Boston Red Sox for first place in the American League East. They won yesterday 4-1 against the Yankees. Chris Tillman getting the win, going 7 innings of one-run ball to improve his record to 14-2, including 7-0 against the American League East, with a 3.18 ERA overall, pitching like an ace for the Orioles this year. The 4-1 win snapped the Orioles' 4-game losing streak, a losing streak in which they only scored 4 runs as a team. Not good enough to get it done. So, Orioles back to their winning ways, opening up a 3-game series against the Cleveland Indians in Baltimore tonight, finally back home for the first time in a long time. Dylan Bundy getting his second Major League first start in front of the home crowd in Baltimore tonight. So, hopefully he can continue the Orioles' winning ways and they win the second game. That constitutes a winning streak. It has happened before. In all seriousness, trade deadline is coming up. A lot of talk about Orioles' contract extension with Manny Machado. It's been brought to everybody's attention that his agent presented the Orioles with a contract extension in spring training, and the Orioles have yet to make a move on that. So, without further ado, let's answer some questions that were asked and get talking about it. Tommy Wimmer asked me, where do I see the Orioles in 5 years? And there's a lot of different factors that go into that. For one, does Manny Machado re-sign here? If Manny Machado signs an extension with the Orioles, I think that has a domino effect. I think that means that Jonathan Schoop re-signs because those guys are best friends. I think that means Chris Tillman signs an extension. I don't think Matt Wieters is coming back. I think Chance Sisco is our catcher of the future. I think we're going to see Trey Mancini in the majors before too long. You got Chris Lee at the minor league level, who's been tearing it up all year as a starting pitcher. I think the Orioles have as good a shot as any team at staying in contention and staying relevant over the next 5 years. Now, there are other contributing factors other than just Manny Machado and Jonathan Schoop and Chris Tillman signing extensions. You have to look at the rest of the division to be able to fully answer that question and see where those teams stand. They all have better minor league systems than the Orioles. I still think the Yankees are in rebuilding mode after this year because on the one hand, they have a lot of old players who are coming off their large contracts pretty soon, like Teixeira and Carlos Beltran and Alex Rodriguez, which is going to open up a lot of contract space for them, a lot of payroll space for them to go out and make moves and sign big-time players like Bryce Harper when he's available in a couple of seasons. So I still think that the Yankees are a couple of years away from being that juggernaut that they used to be. I think Tampa Bay is a couple of years away because I think they may have the best farm system, but that's young, raw talent that they still need to develop over time. I think Toronto's window is closing. Their rotation is pretty solid, but you're going to lose R.A. Dickey here soon. Marcus Stroman hasn't been exactly what you hoped he would be. And offensively, you're going to lose Encarnacion. Troy Tulowitzki and Russell Martin are clearly on the decline. Jose Bautista is clearly on the decline. So this powerful, potent offense that you have, you may not have that window after this season or next season. I think the team that really stands in the Orioles' way of being at the peak of this division is the Boston Red Sox because they traded for Pomeranz, who's under team control. They have David Price, who's going to be better than what he's been this year. He has to be. They have Rick Porcello, who's under a long-term contract, who's pitching lights out this year. So they have the makings of a good starting rotation. They have a good bullpen with Kimbrel and Koji Uehara back there. And their offense, they're losing Ortiz, which means Pablo Sandoval is going to end up being their designated hitter next year when he comes back from injury, which means no time in the field, which means all he has to do is focus on hitting, and you don't want that guy focusing strictly on hitting. And that's before we even talk about guys like Jackie Bradley Jr., who's having a breakout year, and Xander Bogaerts and Mookie Betts. And you already have Hanley Ramirez, who's having a good year. The Red Sox are going to be the team to beat. And I hate to say it because I hate the Red Sox, but they're going to be the team to beat for years to come. And so if the Orioles want to stay relevant, they have to keep pace. Which brings us to the question that Scott Wilson asked me. Can the Orioles stand pat at the trade deadline and make it to the World Series? Scott, never mind the World Series. If the Orioles stand pat at the trade deadline, they can't make the playoffs. Blue Jays are playing great baseball right now. The Red Sox are on fire, and they just made moves to get better with Drew Pomeranz in their starting rotation and Ziegler into their bullpen. along with that offense, Orioles. There's a reason the Orioles are a half game back now. The reason that they're out of first place for the first time since June 4th. These teams are getting better, and the Orioles are remaining stagnant. Now, 54-40, you can't argue with that. That's a good record. But the starting pitching has been bad. Aside from Tillman and the occasional start from Gossman where he's good, other times he's mostly just mediocre, they need to go out and get a starting pitcher. If they don't get a starting pitcher, they're going to flounder and they're not going to make the playoffs. Now, the Orioles are scouting guys like Hellickson and Andrew Kashner and Irvin Santana. Because sometimes I'm a bit of a pessimist, I have a feeling they end up with a guy like Ricky Nolasco, who I have no desire to have. I think Jeremy Hellickson's probably pretty likely, or Andrew Kashner, but there's a lot of other teams that want Kashner too. Despite his terrible ERA this year, he's been good every year before this. But you have to go out and get a starting pitcher, or you're not going to make the playoffs point blank. So to piggyback on that, Scott asks, if a team comes to you and offers you an ace for Jonathan Scope, do you make that move? And that's a good question for a number of reasons. One, I don't think there's a team that's going to come with the right pitcher to trade Scope, because Scope is going to be a cog in your lineup for years to come, having a breakout year. I don't think you trade him for a starting pitcher unless that starting pitcher is somebody along the lines of Chris Sale or Clayton Kershaw or, Zach Greinke. And none of those guys are going to be available. And I know that that's a bit of a stretch to say Scope for one of those guys, but that's how important Scope is to this franchise. Because you also think about the fact that if you trade Scope, it makes it that much less likely that Machado re-signs here, because those guys are best friends. And if you're willing to trade Scope, why wouldn't you be willing to trade Machado? So I don't think you trade Scope. But the other reason that's a good question is because it needs to open the eyes of these fans who expect us to get something for nothing. Guys, here's the bottom line. If you want a good starting pitcher, if you want a good player in a trade, you have to give up players that you probably wouldn't want to give up. We're talking about a Jonathan Scope or a Trey Mancini or a Chance Sisco or a Chris Lee or a Christian Walker. And chances are you're going to have to give up a couple of those guys in a package to get somebody. So a week from now, when the Orioles are traded for a starting pitcher, but they've lost somebody like Chris Lee or they've lost somebody like Trey Mancini, be prepared for that, because it's going to happen. You're not going to get anybody for Ubaldo Jimenez. Nobody's taking that guy. You could release him and he won't find a team. At least not on a major league deal. And for those of you that expect the Orioles to trade Mark Trumbo for a starting pitcher, pipe dream. Not going to happen. First of all, the Orioles aren't going to trade him because he means too much to the middle of this order. He means too much to Scope and Machado and Davis and Jones as far as protection goes in that order. And he's a rental. Nobody's going to give up a top-of-the-line premier starting pitcher for a guy who's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. Trumbo stays on the team all year. Zach Lawrence wants to know why the Orioles can't maintain and develop starting pitching. And to be frank, Zach, if I had the answer to that, I wouldn't be sitting here in my kitchen doing an Orioles YouTube show right now. I'd probably be running a ball club. But it's definitely a black eye on the franchise that the last starting pitcher that the Orioles developed was Mike Mussina 25 years ago. You can make the argument for Eric Bedard, and that's why we have Chris Tillman and Adam Jones on our team right now. And in turn, you can make the argument for Chris Tillman, but Chris Tillman, who came up through our minor league system, wasn't drafted by the Orioles. He was drafted by the Mariners. The Orioles didn't make that pick. So, really, Mike Mussina was the last one. You look at Hunter Harvey, who has made 29 minor league starts in, almost 3 seasons in the organization. This is a guy who, elbow soreness, shoulder soreness, took a line drive off the shin, which is a tough luck injury, but it happened. It's like Nolan Reimold syndrome with him. And unfortunately, the news came out yesterday that he's going to have Tommy John surgery, so he's out the rest of this year, and he's out all next year. That's a tough blow to an already weak farm system. I don't know why the Orioles can't develop starting pitching. I don't know why Jake Arrieta leaves here. All he does is start throwing a cutter and move 8 inches to his left, and all of a sudden he's Cy Young. I don't know why the Orioles can't figure this out and other teams can, but something needs to be done. I don't know if you need to get rid of Rick Peterson. I don't know if you need to get rid of Dom Chidi or Dave Wallace, but something needs to be done because enough is enough. You're falling behind every other team because you cannot draft, develop, and maintain starting pitching, and it's becoming cumbersome to the ball club. Jared Everline in Baltimore asks if the Orioles team chemistry is actually kind of a bad thing. And by that he means that he feels that this team could be too interdependent on each other. If it's either everybody's producing or nobody's producing. And I don't think, Jared, that that's the case. I know that the recent offensive slump has been tough to watch. They scored 4 runs in a 4-game losing streak before winning 4-1 yesterday. That had a lot more to do with a couple of freak injuries. Matt Wieters, fouls the ball off his foot, so he's out for a couple of days. Joey Rickard runs into a wall and bends his thumb back, and then half the ball club got the flu. Even Buck Showalter had to stay home on Wednesday with the flu. Chris Davis missed the first 3 games of the series. Manny Machado missed the 3rd game of the series, a game that the Orioles lost 5-0 because they didn't have any of their powerful hitters aside from Trumbo in the lineup. I don't think team chemistry is ever a bad thing. I don't think that relying on your teammates is ever a bad thing. I mean, you play 162 games, you live with these guys. You see these guys more than you see anybody else. So, no, it's not a bad thing to get along with and depend on your teammates. I think right now that just fluke illness and fluke injuries are kind of causing this team to be on a downturn right now. But coming home for the next 6 or 7 games, I think they'll bounce back, even though they are facing a tough Cleveland rotation. I think they'll be all right. I think they'll come home and start driving the ball again because they're home in the hot, humid weather in Baltimore, and, they get to sleep in their own beds. So I think that will have a lot to do with the turnaround of the offense. I'm saving the best question for last that I really want to get into, but just because I have to answer it, Sam Mullenix from Baltimore, same question he's been asking all year, is Mark Trumbo going to hit 50 dingers? His words. No. I think his ceiling's 42. I wouldn't be surprised to see him top out at 38, 39, or 40 home runs. But I'm gonna put the number at 42 for this year. I think 50 is a lot harder of a number to get to than anybody really realizes. So no, Trumbo's not going to hit 50. He's going to hit anywhere from 38 to 42 this year, which is still a great year. Last question. Going back to, is Manny Machado going to resign here? Where do I see the Orioles in 5 years? Jared Thorson from Bel Air asks, why on earth would Machado have any reason to sign before Bryce Harper? A multitude of reasons. Everybody knows Bryce Harper is going to hit free agency and probably sign the largest contract given to a position player in Major League history, and it's probably going to be with a team like the Yankees or the Red Sox or the Dodgers. Wouldn't be surprised to see the Dodgers because it's back close to home. He grew up in Las Vegas. Probably a West Coast team would make a lot of sense, although the Yankees have that allure. You get a chance to play in the pinstripes, you play in the pinstripes. Machado isn't going to wait for Bryce Harper to sign because, A, his history with injuries. He knows how fragile a Major League career is. He's already had 2 knee surgeries before the age of 24, before the age of 23, actually. And you got to get paid. You got to get paid before it's too late. And he also had a knee injury in the minors. That cost him several months of a minor league season. So he's going to get a big contract extension. He's going to get it from the Orioles. He likes playing in Baltimore. He likes playing at Camden Yards. He likes playing for Buck Showalter. I think he sees a team that's won more games than any other team in the American League over the last 4.5 seasons, and he sees a culture of winning. And he wants to be a main part of that. He wants to be a face of this franchise. He wants to be a face of Major League Baseball. And I think that he knows that happens for him if he stays in Baltimore. The other thing is his best friend plays right next to him at second base, in Jonathan Scope. Scope resigns, Machado resigns. Machado resigns, Scope resigns. There's something to be said for playing baseball with your best friend. It's like playing with your brother. So all those factors are why Manny Machado would have a reason to sign here. So, I think that only helps the Orioles, and I think that at the end of the day, Machado ends up signing a 5-6 year extension with the team, and he's here through his age 30-31 season. That's going to do it for me, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll be back sooner than later with another episode of the Payoff Pitch. Until then, keep watching, keep rooting, and go O's.